This is All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. In our modern day, tarot cards are associated with fortune telling. But for most of its early history, tarot was a card game the Italian Renaissance elite played. Here in America, Gilded Age banker J.P. Morgan had a love of card games, which led him to acquire a number of these original decks, which are now at the center of an exhibit at the Morgan Library. The exhibit explores the visual history of tarot from the 15th century through today, from the Renaissance symbols of those original decks through the innovation represented by the more famous Rider-Waite tarot. It also looks at the transition from card game to metaphysical tools starting in about 18th century France. So let's get into it with my guests, Morgan Library curators Josh O'Driscoll, Frank Trujillo, and Claire Gilman. Thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for having us.
So Frank, first of all, can you describe J.P. Morgan's interest in these cards and its tarot as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. He was a really inveterate solitaire card player, and he also believed in astrology. Mm-hmm. So these Renaissance cards are really dovetail with his sort of personal belief system and just his collecting. So these are beautiful handheld jewels of individual works of art that that are high points of the Renaissance. And so, he it's a combination of card playing, mm-hmm. beautiful art, and 35 cards of these became available to him in 1911, 2 years after the Rider-Waite Smith deck that everybody knows tarot as, and I think he just jumped at the chance to purchase them.
Josh, could you explain the aesthetics of these cards, the initial cards, the original deck?
Sure. So the cards are painted by a prominent court artist named Bonifacio Bembo, who worked for the Visconti Dukes of Milan. And this,
can you say that again?
Bonifacio Bembo.
I just like the way you said that.
And he was a very popular artist for the Dukes. And like much of the art that was produced for these patrons, the art is lush. It's richly ornamented. The gold is tooled. The fashion is high. The colors are brilliant. And they're really spectacular works of art in their own right. And we've situated in the exhibition, we've situated them with works of art in other media like textiles, decorative art, and panel paintings, and illuminated manuscripts. So you could really see how they fit in this courtly world of the Renaissance.
Claire, your curatorial lane for this exhibit is more modern cards and the 20th century occult movements that help push them forward. How does the art change as the purpose of tarot changes?
That is a really good question. It changes quite a bit, obviously, over the centuries. So the Modern Vision section is divided into 4 different historical moments. And we begin with the British Occult Revival, which is the Rider-Waite Smith deck, which you mentioned, which was printed in 1909. And I think, that was already a big step, because one of the things that I think made that deck so popular was the fact that Pamela Coleman Smith, who did the illustrations, illustrated every single card. And that was not something that had been done previously. For the most part, it was just the major arcana that were illustrated. And she created these incredibly narrative scenes, more narrative, I think, than you would say the cards were in the Renaissance. They might be sort of a solitary figure in the Renaissance. And she really went full out and created sort of full-on scenes, which then I think allowed people to enter into those cards. Then when you get to surrealism, which is the second section, you see artists kind of, interpreting those cards in a real variety of ways, and not necessarily creating full decks, but using the imagery and incorporating it into their own aesthetic style. The next section is the U.S. in the 60s and 70s. And there you see, again, this sort of even going further, and people are using the cards in personal ways. And obviously you do see the entrance of a sort of psychedelic kind of, aesthetic that you associate with the 60s and 70s. And then in the contemporary moment, it's kind of like anything goes. I mean, there's such a huge variety of approaches and such a huge number of decks. And, that's really, that there's no sign that is abating in any way.
A new show at the Morgan Library is called Tarot, Renaissance Symbols, Modern Visions. My guests are its curators, Josh O'Driscoll, Frank Trujillo, and Claire Gilman. Listeners, we're talking about the artistry and history of tarot cards, and we want to hear from you. Do you have a favorite card or a favorite deck? Call in and tell us about it. 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. Has the symbolism in tarot helped you identify hidden thoughts or subconscious tendencies, or maybe you're an artist that uses them to brainstorm for ideas and associations? Call in now. Our phone number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. Frank, can you explain why there's an exclamation point after tarot for the exhibit?
Well, we're hoping it'll be self-explanatory after people visit the show. But, I think a lot of it grew from just the excitement of studying the material aspects of these cards. It's a part of a long-term study to see like how these cards were made by these Renaissance artists. And I did this with a group of scientists and conservators at the Met and at Yale Art Institute of Chicago. And we really formed a team and very excited. And I think every interaction kind of had an exclamation point. And then when I pitched the show with Josh and then with Claire, we really hit it off as a great team. And we were really excited about everything that we were looking at every single day and just talking about it and trying to figure out how to present it. And I think that's really on the exclamation point, just to show how excited we were about the whole show.
Claire, do you have a favorite card?
I think, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think I would choose the moon card. I feel like the moon card, has a very strong energy, but it's a sort of off energy, so not quite as strong and sort of centered as the sun, but kind of this sort of alternate energy that kind of creeps in from the side. And I think I kind of move through the world. And also it's just such a beautiful, I'm again thinking of the image that is people most associate with the two dogs howling at the moon. And I just love that image. It's so gorgeous. And it's been used in so many ways by different artists.
How about for you, Josh?
Well, for me, it depends on the deck, but I think across the decks, I would have to go with the Fool card. I think it's just a wonderful image, and I love seeing how artists interpret that stock figure. And there are a number of wonderful fool images from the Renaissance as well.
How about for you, Frank?
I'm going to go with the court card. I keep thinking about this, but I keep coming back to her, the Queen of Swords and the Visconti Sforza deck. I don't know. I just really love the way she's presented. It's actually not a highly decorated card. She has a long white flowing dress, and she's a side profile, but it's a nice look. She has a really intense looking gauntlets too. She looks martial and pretty fun.
So you named 3 different cards. Josh, how do the visual images on the cards, how are they in conversation with each other?
So the imagery of the cards comes out of Renaissance visual culture. You see all the personifications that you find in other works of art: the fool, love, time, death, the devil, and they're arranged roughly in a hierarchy. So going from the lowest figure to the highest figure. And that basically comes from one of the main literary sources of tarot, which is Petrarch's Triumphs, which is a poem that describes 6 allegorical processions with one personification triumphing over another. And so the cards are seen in this sequence. One beats the other. And you see that in the imagery as well.
It's interesting. When you answered, Frank, you mentioned that you worked with scientists, which I'm sure caught several people's ears.
Yes.
Tell us about this investigation that you did.
Yeah, so I think we have a deck of cards, the Visconti Sforza deck, and Yale has the Visconti di Modrone deck, and the Pinacoteca de Brera has the Brambilla deck. And, colleagues in conservation and conservation science, colleagues in 2019, we sort of looked at the cards and we looked at each other and said, you have a deck, these beautiful works of art. How were they made? How did these Renaissance artists put this together? And in order to answer that, we did material studies with conservation scientists using incredibly advanced analytical equipment, and we really discovered that they're almost like a 7-layer cake of construction. There's like several layers of paper, and then all the traditions of Renaissance artwork that it incorporates panel painting and drawings and manuscript illumination all in one object.
It's interesting. We got a text that says, always the rider deck with its dreamy backgrounds. The fool, the most wonderful. It's interesting because the folks behind the rider deck invented a story about tarot being a divination practice in ancient Egypt, I believe it was.
Right. Well, it wasn't actually the Rider-Waite-Smith
Okay.
people who invented that. That actually goes back to 18th century France. That was sort of where that idea arose. And so I think we can now say for sure that, tarot did not originate in ancient Egypt. But let's keep that lore going because, it's fun to think about. And certainly because of that, a lot of subsequent artists have incorporated Egyptian imagery into the cards. So now you could say that is kind of part of the history of the cards, even if the cards did not themselves, originally.
I think the question is, so why would they make up a story about tarot?
I think there was just, a desire to somehow kind of find find an origin for this their mystical quality, I guess, and to go back as far as these people could imagine, right? So the most sort of ancient form of mystical practice, I think, would have been suggested by ancient Egypt, and so I think there is this sense of trying to link these cards to sort of the oldest possible origin. So I don't know if
and also in this time in France, there was a wave of Egyptomania that was spreading through. They were fascinated with all things that had to do with Egypt. And as Claire mentioned, there's a long-standing tradition of seeing Egypt as a land of magic and mystery. And that all combined into this fabricated origin for the history of tarot.
We are talking about a new show at the Morgan Library. It's called Tarot, Renaissance Symbols, Modern Visions. My guests are curators Josh O'Driscoll, Frank Trujillo, and Claire Gilman. Listeners, we're talking about the artistry and the history of tarot cards, and we want to hear from you. Do you have a favorite card or a favorite deck? Do you use them as an artist for inspiration? Our number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. This is a question for all of you. Frank, I'll start with you. Was a curatorial or a presentation choice that you all made that communicates something in the room? It's not necessarily about, you can look at it in a book and you can read about tarot, but you understand it better in the exhibit.
Yeah, I think the focus as it emerged as we were discussing this together, we're stretching from the first deck, which is 1441, and we have artwork from 2025, contemporary artists, and I think we just actually 2026, we have fresh out of the studio, but I think because of that, we realized that we just really hit on this idea that how do artists respond to these archetypes, and tarot really provides a backboard for the artist's imagination to constantly to play their ideas off of it, and the imagery has been consistent for 600 years, but it's every artist takes their approach and does something differently with it, and I think that was sort of the unifying theme, and we're hoping that visitors will come and see that a Renaissance artist really pours their heart into something just as much as a contemporary artist does.
What is something for you that people will understand by being in the room?
Well, so for us in the Renaissance Gallery, one of the main challenges that we had to figure out right away was how to display the deck itself, whether to display them all at once in one location or to spread them throughout the exhibition. And we went with the latter option because we wanted to have people see different aspects of the cards as they relate to different types of material. So in different thematic sections, the cards are carried through and you can see them in different lights, I think.
How about for you, Claire?
Yeah, I think it was Frank that said one of the things he felt like when he sort of went from the Renaissance section into the modern contemporary section was that there was just this sudden explosion of creativity. So I think that was something that I wanted to get across. And so there's a lot of color in my section. I do also want to give a shout out to our amazing designer, Stephen Saitis, who we worked with, who was just incredible in kind of making the two sections feel unified. And so we have this kind of unifying purple color, and then they have a burgundy as a complement, and I have a very light pink color as a complement. And so I feel like I wanted to bring out that energy and color and just the sheer variety of creativity in the 20th and 21st centuries. So, there are a lot of objects in my section, and I wanted it to feel full and explosive in that way, but also to feel contained and coherent. And so that's how I ended up with those divisions into 4 different historical moments. So you can really move from one to the next, but yet there is this sort of explosion of color and energy throughout.
And I think you already explained this, but could you tell us the 4 movements again?
So the 4 movements are the British occult revival, surrealism, the U.S. in the 60s and 70s, and the contemporary moment.
Let's talk to Missy from Jackson Heights. Hi, Missy. Thank you so much for making the time to call All of It. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Allison. Hello to your guests. I'm so excited to talk with you today. I love tarot cards, and I actually became a member of the Morgan because between the Mozart exhibit and the tarot cards coming up, I just had to join. So I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm calling because I wanted to share. Right now, I'm really into the Rider-Waite deck, and I do use it, and I find it's kind of creepy. I really feel like some of the things that happen when I read cards are just kind of spot on what I need to look at. I find them a really helpful tool for self-growth and exploration, and maybe even getting some insight that I wasn't aware of regarding a problem. But I wanted to also share that years ago, my favorite deck was the Mother Piece deck. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, it's in the show, actually.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. So, the cards are round, and they're completely from a feminist goddess perspective.
That's so interesting. Do you want to share a little bit, Claire?
Oh, so one of the things that we felt it was really important to do. So in the galleries itself, we're mostly showing works by artists who are not necessarily tarot artists or not exclusively tarot artists or working with tarot imagery. But we also very much wanted to represent, just simply tarot artists or people who are most known for making decks. So in the kind of area in between the 2 galleries, we have a couple of cases where we've assembled important decks, and the Mother Piece is one of those decks. And I think exactly for the reasons that you just mentioned, it's just it's a sign of the way in which tarot increasingly, and I think probably starting in the 60s and 70s, began to be used by alternative communities and as a kind of alternatives to mainstream patriarchal culture. And the Mother Piece was very, very important, I think, in that context.
Let's talk to Maria, who's calling in from Manhattan. Hi, Maria. Thanks for calling All of It. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to mention I think it's called the Rosicrucian deck. And it's stored away somewhere, sadly, but it was one of my favorite decks. And when everybody was going out buying the Rider deck, for some reason I was drawn to this one because it's just absolutely one of the most beautiful decks you will ever see, or at least I will ever see. And in spite of the fact that I never really used it for mystical reasons, but I do think tarot works as sort of a think piece, almost like a puzzle. Like if you're trying to figure something out and you need to reference something, or if you need to sort of defer a thought, it's a really good tool to go to. But I did have a question regarding some of the more modern decks. Like, didn't some modern artists, I don't know if it was Keith Haring or I stand corrected, but are any of those featured in the show?
I don't know of a deck created by Keith Haring, but yes, we do have a lot of, both decks as well as just, not complete decks, but modern contemporary artists who are working with tarot imagery. So, again, we did divide the show into these specific sections, but for instance, in surrealism, we have many works by Leonora Carrington. We weren't able to show her actual major arcana because those aren't lent, but we have the sort of reproduced deck and other works by her. We have an amazing deck by Eiffel Colquhoun, who is a British surrealist, by the Breton group surrealists themselves. Then in the 60s, Niki de Saint-Phal made it. She didn't, again, her deck was published later, but she made this incredible tarot garden which she worked on from the 70s through the 90s. And so we have her deck, the first photographic deck by an artist named B. Nettles. And then in the contemporary period, many, many different decks. So a lot of major figures that are represented in the show.
Frank, I'm interested in studying as an art historian. There was a tradition of visually mutilating the devil cards, right? So very few are intact. What other challenges did you have in putting this together and researching this?
Fortunately, didn't have to do anything for the devil card because those don't exist. None of them exist
None?
any longer. But we do have a Divine Comedy and an amazing devil on display. But that is also defaced, and you'll find that in medieval manuscripts. Just the defacing of this sort of evil character of the devil. But the challenges really were just, these are works of art that are several hundred years old. So we definitely had to make sure that the pigments in particular were not flaking, just and doing things to make sure that they were safe. And but as far as any effacement was, there's a question as to whether or not these cards were actually used as game playing. Although frescoes of the period do show people playing the game of tarocchi, as it was called in Italy at the time. So we're assuming that they were used, and some of that wear and tear is just from like your card deck at home. It's worn at the front and the back too.
Let's talk to Martha, who's calling from Montclair. Hey, Martha, thank you so much for calling All of It. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. I've been reading tarot at the New York Renaissance Fair for over 40 years. And I started reading when I was about 13, when my mother taught me astrology, and I started doing tarot as well. And I have another story about how the idea of tarot came from Egypt. And, one of these stories about it, one of the lore, is that they were saved from the burning of the Library of Alexandria, which sounds pretty mythic to me, but anyway. But they were apparently, when the Roma people were migrating into Spain. This is what I had heard. So again, it's a piece of the lore, that the Spanish king accepted them coming in because they called themselves Egyptian, and then that's where the gypsy, which is now considered a slur, so I don't want to keep using it, but that's where the idea that the tarot may have come from. That's another possible idea of how tarot may have been associated with Egypt.
Thank you so much for calling, Martha. Josh, as we wrap up, what do you hope people take away from this exhibit?
I hope people come to see the cards themselves because they're really spectacular objects, and it's not something that we could display that often because of light exposure reasons.
Oh, sure.
And not only that, but it's very rare to see them displayed in the context of their historical period. So it's a really special chance to see these wonderful objects. And I hope people will explore how wonderful the tradition is. It's an incredible 600-year-long artistic tradition. It's stable on the one hand, but it's also always inventive and always new.
It is called Tarot! Renaissance Symbols, Modern Visions. My guests have been curators Josh O'Driscoll, Frank Trujillo, and Claire Gilman. It's at the Morgan Library. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.